Very happy to have you, Jeffrey. We look forward to actually practicing telepathy. Energy is something that we all work on, and we are here to help you so we can tap into your field. If you'd like to telepathically send it to us first, we would greatly receive that from you, Jeffrey, to keep entropy low, energy high. I appreciate you being here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you. It seems as if the Zoom is asking me to admit people.
Don't you worry, Jeffrey. I am seeing Nina. I have let her in. She's
Okay.
here.
I
You can
made
just relax. We will take care of that.
All right. I won't try to let anyone else in.
oh no.
Well, could I ask a question, Jeffrey? That photo you just had right behind you, that was very intriguing. Do you mind expanding on what that
That
piece of
you
art is?
This is
Yes.
a um, antique Chinese print of Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen Buddhism.
Mm.
It shows that he's uh, crossing the River Lee and he's standing just on a reed. He had a visit. He came to China, as I recall, from India. He had a visit with the emperor, and the emperor said to him, "Well, who do you think I am?" And Bodhidharma said, "I don't know. Who are you?" And the emperor was very displeased with that response. So Bodhidharma had to flee. And he came to the Yangtze River and found a simple little reed and stepped on it and crossed over the river and then founded the Shaolin Monastery where the monks practice martial arts.
That is so cool. So, is that a cloak he's in?
Well,
Is
I
he
guess,
stand?
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. And so what year was that piece of art produced?
Oh, I don't know. I'm guessing it's about 100 years old.
Ooh, nice. Nice. Cool. Well, where are you right now in the world, Jeffrey?
I'm in Albuquerque.
Hmm. I love that.
Where
And
are
that's
you?
where where am I? I am in the Blue Mountains, Ontario, in Canada. Do you know where that is?
I've been there.
Oh, lovely. What were you doing in this neck of the woods?
Well, I've been to Toronto a few times.
Oh, that's where I was born. Yeah. Toronto, Ontario, baby.
Mhm.
It's a good
Okay.
town.
Yes, it is.
Hmm.
So I think we can start. Just like let people arrive as they do. And yeah, I have the great honor of welcoming you, Jeffrey. Um, Many of you may know him as the host of the New Thinking Out Loud, where he has interviewed one of like some of the most fascinating minds in the consciousness world, and also somebody who's very close to our hearts, Tom Campbell. So I'm very excited to have you here. I met you at the Psi Games, Jeffrey, and I was very touched by your kind and humble energy. And I'm really looking forward to learn more just about who you are and your journey today. And also here at the Hub, we are dedicated to make consciousness studies and exploration more accessible to people. And we do want to become mainstream. We want to make it like a mainstream idea to bring this ideas forward and this research forward, and also the practice. So we're very practice focused here. We have like different practice groups on remote viewing, healing, limiting beliefs, and yeah. So would you like to maybe start telling us a little bit about who you are, what inspires you, just to give you a little bit of an introduction?
Oh, okay. Well, you mentioned that I host the New Thinking Aloud channel on YouTube. That's probably the main thing that I've been doing. We just celebrated 10 years on YouTube, but I've actually been doing interviews for over 50 years. I started in 1972 on the radio and then launched a television series that ran from 1986 to 2002. So largely, I've been an interviewer and an author along the way. I got a doctoral degree in parapsychology from the University of California at Berkeley. Happens to be the only, to my knowledge, doctoral diploma that actually says parapsychology on it, ever awarded by an accredited university. So that's largely my focus is the paranormal. I've written a book called The PK Man about a 10-year field study investigation I did with a fellow named Ted Owens, who claimed to have superpowers and demonstrated them over and over again. He claimed that he was gifted by some sort of contact with alien beings from a UFO, which is a common story these days. And that research, as I mentioned, went on for about 10 years from 1976 until his death in 1987. What else can I tell you? Oh, I recently been involved in creating a opportunity for people to receive graduate degrees, accredited graduate degrees with a concentration on parapsychology at the California Institute for Human Science. So that's an important activity. We just finished offering the very first course on the introduction to parapsychology. We've taught a course there on remote viewing. This quarter, in a couple of weeks, the history of parapsychology and psychical research course begins. So it's a unique educational opportunity for people who are interested in making a career in this area.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful news. So, as the only one who holds a degree worldwide at this moment, this is truly pioneer work. I
Well, to be fair, there are hundreds of people who have done doctoral level research in parapsychology. My distinction is simply that my diploma doesn't say education or psychology or philosophy. It actually says parapsychology. And the reason is because I did a very unique individual interdisciplinary doctoral major at Berkeley. And instead of, as many people do, they would get a degree in, let's say, experimental psychology, but do a parapsychological dissertation.
Wow, and after so many decades of experience, you're like a true OG of the parapsychological field. And after all of these interviews, it's like since we're all explorers of consciousness here in the group as well, if like what questions are still unanswered for you? If you could just like download an answer to one mystery of reality, what would it be?
Maybe a better way to put it is what questions have been answered. And the answer is I know Tom Campbell believes that he has all the answers so far, but and I admire his work very much, but I think that we don't know much about anything actually. For all the knowledge that human beings have accumulated, and we can build atomic bombs and send rockets into outer space, there's so little that we really know, especially about ourselves. Like, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be conscious? Why is it, if we're all part of one consciousness, why does it seem so separate? Why don't I have an awareness that I'm really you all the time? Why do I think I'm only me, for example? There are lots of mysteries. They're almost unending. And in the field of parapsychology, the mysteries are enormous. We don't have a good theory yet to explain extrasensory perception or psychokinesis. I think that Tom's work, based on idealistic metaphysics combined with what's known these days as the simulation hypothesis, is as good an effort as any that I'm aware of. But there's lots of gaps in his theory, to my knowledge. There are, how does it exactly work, this computer that isn't in physical space at all? How can you have a computer outside of time and space that's generating all of this? It's really a metaphor. And when it comes down to a real testable scientific model, we have a very long way to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, Tom is very confident about his studies and his work, and I do agree it's metaphors, right? It's just about how to put this into words, because to experience consciousness is a very vague thing to talk about, right? Like how would you put into words what consciousness even is?
Good point, because we often use the word consciousness to refer to the unconscious. As a matter of fact, most of what we do is unconscious. My heart is beating every moment, it's day or night, whether I'm awake or asleep. My heart keeps beating. I keep breathing. My digestion is taking place, but it's all outside of my consciousness. And yet, when I use the term consciousness, I often mean it in this larger sense to include processes that are outside of my awareness. And especially when we talk about mystical forms of consciousness, which I think are very important. The idea, for example, that we are all one. It's, supremely important idea to me, but we're mostly unconscious of that. We go about our daily lives taking care of our immediate needs, and most people might only spend a few minutes a day at most thinking about, oh, I'm one with everything.
And what about the conscious exploration part? You've explored so many ideas and traditions in the past decades. So how does your own spiritual practice and connection to consciousness look like in your day-to-day life, and how has it evolved over time as well?
Well, when I was younger, I got involved in every kind of program that I could imagine. I did many different forms of meditation and yoga and psychotherapy and athletics. And these days, I'm 78 years old now. It's mostly about being present, being in the here and now, being with whoever I'm with at the moment, and doing interviews really enforces that, because when I do an interview with somebody, it's very important to be completely present to what's happening in the here and now. So I guess you could say that's my discipline.
And what programs did you try, or what experience did you have that also fundamentally shifted your worldview, that you came to the conclusions that it's important to be present, and to do also to evaluate the importance of the work that you have dedicated your life to?
Well, there were a number of key experiences. One of them, for example, took place in March of 1972. If you had known me then, you would have seen a graduate student in criminology doing volunteer work at San Quentin Prison in the psychiatric unit, conducting group therapy sessions with murderers and rapists. And it was at that point in my life when I had a dream that turned my life around. It was probably the most powerful dream of my whole life. And to be fair, I already had a deep interest in meditation and in consciousness, but in my mind in those days, the only possible career path might be to go into psychotherapy. So
Like,
That was a skit.
in this dream, my great uncle Harry appeared to me. And it was such a powerful dream. Uncle Harry, I hadn't seen him in over a decade. He was in his 80s, more than 50 years older than me. But in this dream, it was a deep communion. And I woke up from the dream and I was just crying tears of joy and singing a very sacred song from the Jewish religion. And Uncle Harry was a very pious Jewish man. And so I wrote home. I said, "How's Uncle Harry? I had a dream about him." And my mother called me as soon as she got the letter and said, "How did you know? Uncle Harry just died." And as I tried to figure out exactly when he died in relationship to my dream, as best I can tell, it was simultaneous. I had the dream pretty much at the moment of his death. And so I asked my mother, "Could you arrange for me to have some object of his that I can remember him by?" And they sent me a little book. They said this was Uncle Harry's favorite book. It was in Yiddish, which is a Jewish language spoken in Eastern Europe by Jewish people. And it's really a German dialect, but it's written in Hebrew characters. And I had to get it translated. And it turned out to be the tales of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of the Hasidic movement in Judaism, the mystical tradition going back to the 17th century. And it was then I realized that I'd had mystics in my family, and Uncle Harry was one of them, but he kept it hidden. For all I knew, he just ran a small corner grocery store. So after I had that dream, I realized that I could no longer just continue on the same track, which was basically studying negative forms of human deviance, crime, and psychopathology. I decided then that I had to spend my life looking at positive forms of human deviance, meaning mysticism, creativity, psychic functioning, intuition. But there weren't any opportunities to do that. So certainly I didn't find any at the university. Or any other university in those days. You could study crime and psychopathology in many different departments, but they didn't have a department of mysticism. So I agonized and agonized about it for months, trying to figure out how am I going to do this. And then one day, I woke up and I knew I'm going to find the answer today. In fact, I knew the answer is going to come to me tonight in a dream. It was just like a feeling of certainty. And in fact, I did. I had a dream that night, and I woke up from the dream feeling that I had the answer. And in that dream, I was visiting some friends who lived across town in Berkeley, California, where I was, and knocked on the door of their apartment. There was no answer. So in the dream, I found a key. I let myself in the middle of the living room floor of this little apartment in married student housing, there was a magazine, and I picked it up in the dream, started paging through it, and that's when I woke up with this feeling, I've got it, this is it. And in the dream, the magazine was called EYE, which happened to be a popular magazine back then. So, not knowing what to make of the dream, even though I felt for sure I had the answer, I acted it out. I got up at 7 in the morning, put on my tennis shoes, ran across town 5 miles, came to this apartment, knocked on the door, as I had done in the dream. There was no answer. And I happened to know where they hid a key. So I let myself into the apartment, walked into the living room, and as I had dreamt, right in the middle of the living room floor was this magazine all spread out. I picked it up, I started paging through it, and the actual magazine was named Focus. For any of you who are familiar with the San Francisco Bay Area, it's the magazine of listener-sponsored radio and television, KQED. And as I was paging through it, it dawned on me I could pursue my interests by getting involved in the nonprofit section of the media, which was a new idea, completely a new idea for me because I did not own a radio or a television. And at the time, if you had known me, I was a long-haired hippie. I didn't believe in electronic media. I thought it was all phony. If you would ask me at that time, I would have said that the only authentic communication is face to face. But I changed my mind then and there, and I went over to KPFA radio in Berkeley, where I was living, and it was a Pacifica radio station, nonprofit. And I said, even though I had my master's degree by then, I said, I'm here to volunteer. And they said, good, sit at this desk. And when you hear the doorbell ring, push this button and let people in the front door, which I gladly did. And within 3 weeks, I had learned how to produce a radio show. I produced my first show. It was with interviewing friends of mine who were psychic. And the title was, You Don't Have to Be From Out of Town to Be Psychic. And the program director liked it so much, he said, we happen to have this available slot every Tuesday and Thursday at noon. There we have a program called The Mind's Year, and we need somebody to host it. Would you mind hosting that program? And so within just a few weeks of this dream, I found myself sitting at a table and world-class experts in all the subjects that interested me the most, coming through the San Francisco Bay Area on their book tours, would stop in at KPFA radio, which had a very powerful transmitter, and I would interview them with 10,000 people listening in, which then gave me the confidence to go back to the university and take advantage of a very obscure rule, which if you can find, if you're a graduate student in good standing, and you can find 3 faculty members from different departments who are willing to sponsor you to write a dissertation in an area that no single department will cover, then you can set up your own individual interdisciplinary doctoral major. So that's what I did. And really, I've been on that path for over half a century now. And that's how I got started. Although, to be honest, my interest in these topics began earlier. Even when I was an undergraduate, I wrote a senior honors thesis at the University of Wisconsin, where I was a psychology major, on the psychology of religious mysticism. And at the time, when I started the project, I was very conventional. I thought I'm going to show that there's some form of mental illness that causes people to believe that they see ghosts and that they're having all of these mystical experiences. But the more I delved into it, even then I realized that, wait a second, these people who claim to be mystics are among the most successful, creative people in our culture. So maybe it's not a pathology. Maybe there's something really to it.
So
I'll
after all,
stop there. Yeah, go ahead.
and so I just wanted to know if after all these years being an intellectual and like a researcher, if you have also become a mystic yourself.
Well, how do you define a mystic?
Well, somebody who does explore consciousness and lives in the intuitive world and on like a being level world and appreciates the magic that life has to offer.
Well, I guess that would apply then. I don't consider myself a guru. I don't think of myself as somebody who is enlightened and I'm here to share enlightenment. I, but I've been an explorer and a student my whole life. And I would probably define a mystic as a person who understands that they are one with everything. And I would say I do understand that intellectually. I can't say that I've had a lot of deep experiences so that I lived my whole life that way, but I aspire to do that.
You have had quite a wonderful journey. That's really inspiring. I and after all these years interviewing all of these people, if you could just choose one that you could like have an entire night with on a campfire, just having a conversation, who would you choose?
Well, I think the one person who has influenced me the most is probably Gene Houston, who is a teacher I've spent a lot of time with when I was younger. She's a humanistic psychologist. I think when I met her, she was the president of the Association for Humanistic Psychology. And I first got acquainted with her in 1973. She's written many books. I highly recommend all of them. She still does workshops and various programs. I highly recommend them all.
What have you learned from her?
Well, it's nothing so simple that I could put it into a single sentence, but I'll give you an example of her teaching style. She would lecture. She had a program called a mystery school that I attended, I think, for a couple of years, in which people got together for, I think, 9 weekends a year. And it included, she would lecture, there would be body work and dancing and singing and uh, various meditative exercises and other processes she would go through. If I recall correctly, she based a lot of her work on the writings of Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey. And also, she was very influenced by method acting of Stanislavski. She had a theater background, and was her father, who she talked about a lot, was he wrote jokes for the great comedians of the 1930s and 40s, people like Bob Hope and Jack Benny. He was a comedy writer, so she's a very funny person and gifted. She could do accents and impersonations beautifully. So she was, thoroughly entertaining, thoroughly intellectual, deeply mystical. So on one occasion, she was giving a lecture on the Hebrew Kabbalah, or Kabbalah, as some people would pronounce it, and going through the meaning of the very first sentence in the book of Genesis in the Bible in Hebrew, which is Bereshit bara Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz, in Hebrew, which means in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. And the Kabbalistic system is one where every letter of every word is a word of its own. And that word is broken into letters. And each of those letters are a word of their own, and on and on. It's like an infinite progression, like a fractal. You could just keep expanding it infinitely. So she was trying to explain if you went through all the letters of the sentence, then you would know how God created the world. You would understand it. And so she's giving this whole lecture, and as she's lecturing, I felt like I got it. I understood how God created the world. And it was so intense. I'm rolling on the floor and laughing my head off. And then I'd break into tears and think, oh, what passion that God created the world. And the next moment I'd be laughing again and crying and laughing and crying. And Jean Houston saw this and she came over to me and she winked at me and she said, oh, you're having an epiphany, huh? So she was the kind of person who could trigger those sorts of experiences in people, deep mystical experiences like that. It was a rare gift, and I would say she probably had it more than anybody else I know.
So how did God create the world? What epiphany did you have?
Well, you have to be in an altered state of consciousness to understand it, actually. But I would say it was done out of deep love and out of a sense of joyful mirth and also in the knowledge that there would be a lot of pain and suffering as a result, but that at the end it would all be good.
And what do you think is the meaning behind all of this? Did you get epiphany on that too?
Well, I don't know that I could put it as succinctly as Tom has to say, oh, the meaning is that we're all supposed to lower our entropy. Uh, but I probably would have said something similar, like, we're here to learn about love. We're here to learn what that really means. Or some people would say that the universe or God created this universe and human beings so that it could, through us, the universe comes to know itself. But I like that interpretation as well.
That was deep. That was nice. I like that one.
So we have mentioned Tom a few times. I'm just curious, and probably all of us are. How has engaging with him in his work reshaped or expanded your worldview?
Well, it's certainly provocative. And I've been aware of Tom's work for many years, but felt hesitant to jump into it because there's these 3 volumes and it seemed like a lot to wade through. I found in my conversations with him that he's very loving, he's very engaging. He seems very self-assured, maybe too self-assured, but at the same time, I think he's a wise person. I think he's expressed a lot of soulfulness. I get the impression Tom is an old soul and that he's here on a mission. I understand what that's like. I feel like I'm on a mission myself. So I have a feeling of brotherly affection for Tom, like we're both on the same path, more or less. Uh, what else can I say about him? He's a great hugger. I will say that.
He is, yeah. He is very confident with what he's saying, and in my personal experience, I think he has to be, just because of the strong message he wants to put out there,
Uh,
and also how he wants to help induce that paradigm shift we're all longing for deeply.
I think that's all true, and I think he's done an excellent job of putting it together. It's a lot easier to be critical of somebody who comes up with a theory than it is to come up with the theory. So it's very easy to take pot shots at a person like Tom. But I will say that I've known many other theorists who have theories of everything, and one of my mentors was such a person, Arthur M. Young, who invented the Bell helicopter and wrote a wonderful book describing his theory called The Reflexive Universe. And I would say that when people develop theories over time, there is a tendency to think that their theory is absolutely true and that it explains everything. And it could be a theory of botany, it could be a theory of physics, it could be a psychological theory, but it is a kind of trap. I will call it a trap that is particularly endemic among theorists. So it's very difficult not to fall in love with your own theory.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the same experience engaging with the parapsychological field and all the speakers
Mhm.
in there. That's why I was curious about people that have inspired you on another level other than their theories, right? And I think Jane Houston was a very good example of how there's people who have not necessarily studied the science, but have been really focusing on the application
Yeah.
of work and have found a way to communicate it into people so they can have their own experiences of consciousness.
And Jean Houston was very gifted at that. I've seen her, for example, hypnotize people. When I attended her mystery school, she had an assistant, a lady named Mary, who was a gifted pianist. And Jean would put her into trance and say, now I want you to come out of the trance and compose a piece of music in the style of, and she'd name a composer, could be any composer. And Mary would come out of the trance, go right to the piano, and sit down and perform for half an hour, just like that, a piano concerto in the style of whoever was mentioned. So she understood the power of the depths within us. Gene Houston used to say, we are born and given this mind body system, and it's exquisite. It's like a Stradivarius violin, but most of us only learn how to play it as if it was a plastic fiddle.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I've had other teachers along the way. I'm happy to talk about them, but go ahead. You had a question.
yeah, that was actually going to be my question. It was like the telepathy is working. Yeah, is there another teacher that has shaped your life and the way you relate to to consciousness or to
Well,
just
in truth, everyone I interview becomes, the most important person in my life while I'm interviewing them. And so I've gotten a lot. I've interviewed over 1,000 people, so I've gotten a lot from so many people. But there have been a few very special ones. I had a long-term friendship with a fellow physicist in the San Francisco Bay Area when I lived there named Dean Brown. And he was a mentor to me. Dean was a person who had I'm trying to, a polymath, maybe the term that you hear these days. He was a Sanskrit scholar, wrote a book about the Upanishads. He was a physicist who worked on nuclear weapons and was a colleague of Einstein at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton when Einstein was there. The two of them used to play Go together, a Chinese game that I also play. And because they were studying von Neumann's game theory and using Go as a way to understand it. And he had a collection of grasses from all over the world. He just, simple thing like a blade of grass, he would look at it and be able to tell you what country it came from. I remember once taking a walk with him down, if you're ever familiar with Marin County, California, the Tennessee Valley Road is a little road that you can walk on to the ocean, about a 2-mile walk. And we're walking down it, and Dean is pointing out all the plants along the way. And he says, this one is native to California. This one was brought over from Europe. And I said, well, how many plants are there native to California? And he said, oh, about 5,000. I said, well, I bet you can name them all, huh? And he said, well, there are actually about 10,000 plants native to North America, and I can name them all. So he had an amazing mind and was a wonderful friend of mine and deeply interested in parapsychology and a close friend to many people in the parapsychology community. When I came of age in the 1970s in the San Francisco Bay Area, was a very active community because that's where they were doing research with Uri Geller at SRI International. I ended up sponsoring Uri Geller's first major public appearance in the United States at Zellerbach Hall at the University of California to an overflow crowd. The hall fit 1,800 people, but we had to turn many people away. But so there was research going on in different pockets all across the Bay Area. I would consider it the capital of consciousness. I used to think of it in that sense. There were ashrams of every type and Tibetan centers and humanistic psychology centers and the Esalen Institute and Zen centers and so much activity of a human potential and parapsychology nature. Growing up, it was like, for me, in those early years, it was intoxicating, actually. And when I say intoxicating, I mean it gave me a sense that we're about to change the world. Everything is going to be different when people understand these discoveries that are taking place here in this community. And of course, I can look back now, 50 years later, and say, well, it did not change the world. Jacques Vallée, the computer scientist and UFO researcher who is part of the community in the Bay Area, commented that he was involved in creating the internet, among other things. And he thought and he was also involved in parapsychology and UFO studies. He thought that all of these things had an opportunity to change everything. But we can see now the internet did. The use of computers completely revolutionized our culture over the last 50 years. Parapsychology has yet to do so, and UFO studies have yet to do so. But the reason I think is they reach deeper. They reach into our metaphysics. And metaphysics, I think, is probably the deepest subject people can get into. I was very much inspired by a sociologist named Pitaram Sorokin, who founded the Department of Social Relations at Harvard University. And Sorokin maintained that metaphysics is the glue that holds society together. Actually, when metaphysical systems change, as they are right now, societies tend to fall apart. The trust that people have, the normal social rules that keep things running in an organized way break down. And I think we can see that happening now because there's a big metaphysical conflict going on between the materialists who still dominate the scientific world and people who are awakening to the idea that consciousness or spirit is more fundamental than matter. It's a deep divide in our culture, and as a result, what you find is that violence, domestic violence, terrorism, is on the increase. Of course, there's always the danger of a major world war. And we've had already in the previous century 2 world wars. Everybody is saying, when's the next one going to come? It seems as if we're getting closer. So we live in dangerous times. I think if you listen to the anger and animus that is being expressed in the news today, you may wonder what's going on. And the deeper reason to me seems to be that society is actually breaking down in a healthy way, potentially, because we're going through a metaphysical shift right now. We've had basically a dominant materialistic sensate culture for 500 years since the Renaissance. I mean, you can argue about, century by century, what's going on. Uh, but it does seem that more and more people, like Tom, are saying, matter is not the ultimate. The ultimate is something, you could call it spirit, you could call it consciousness. It's not matter. It's something else. And that for many people is, well, for some people, it's impossible for them to grasp it. They just can't. They're so deeply imbued and have been taught their whole lives that everything is based on atoms and molecules, that it has to be that way. Um, but that point of view is also ironically correlated with the idea that materialistic metaphysics is linked to materialistic ethics. And materialistic ethics is, whoever dies with the most toys wins. And it doesn't matter if you lie or cheat to get there. What matters is to accumulate the most. And so that is a breakdown of social norms, and that's what we're seeing. So I think I went off on a few tangents there, but I'll um, be happy to answer any questions that you or anyone else may have.
No,
Yeah,
that was good, Jeffrey. That was good. Sorry, go ahead, Caroline. Caroline, that was really good.
yeah, I think you touched on some very significant and important topics, and it's something that we we have as a mission also as the hub, we do want to take part in that and influence the paradigm shift. We do understand the urgency of shifting things quickly. And our strategy is to help people have more experience, more deep experience, and have a community where they can talk about these things and they can connect to people. And the wonderful thing about Tom is that yes, he is convinced about his own theory, like every other person with their own theory, but he does encourage us to explore on our own. So I think the one phrase that stuck with me since the beginning when I first discovered him 13 years ago was that don't believe me anything, just go and explore for yourself. And that's basically what I've been doing for the past decade. And I've been coming to the same conclusions that you did. And yeah, so I'm super happy to connect and to see that there's more people working on this mission. And I'd also like to know, what do you think, what change needs to happen in order for us to induce like this big paradigm shift? What do you think is needed right now?
Well, I don't think a paradigm shift can occur consciously. I don't think you can make it happen. And I don't think you can rush it. I'm not even sure it's a good idea to try to rush it. The, yes, the situation is urgent, but telling people it's urgent doesn't help, ironically. And so patience is very important. These shifts can take hundreds of years. So we can all just do our little part. It's a big world. There are millions and billions of people out there. But each time you have an interaction with another human being or animal or even a plant or even an object, I think every little thing we do makes a difference as far as I can tell. So, just living your life in a way that's mindful of all the little things that you can do to make a difference is very helpful.
Changing the world one step at a time.
No.
So now that we talked a lot about your work, how I would like to know more about Jeffrey. I'd like to know, what is the biggest misconception people have about you? What would you say?
Well, I'll tell you something funny, and that is throughout my life, many people, for some reason, call me Jerry instead of Jeffrey. I've never been able to figure that out, but it happens repeatedly. So I don't know what to make of that. Um, it's not a serious misconception at all. I don't know that people have a misconception. I don't pay a lot of attention to what people think of me or think about me. I receive a lot of positive feedback for what I'm doing. So um, the world is full of people who are very disturbed. I think if you were to count the percentage of people in the population who are suffering from mental illness of different kinds, depression, autism, schizophrenia, uh, psychopathology, sociopathology, you could name many, many other forms of anxiety disorders and so on. You're referring to addictions, a good 30% of the whole population. And many young people in particular, because social norms are breaking down, uh, they are not raised to be polite or to be respectful of, let's say, civic responsibilities, to appreciate the Constitution of the United States of America. There seems to be a rush right now to move the oldest democracy in the world towards a fascist dictatorship. Um, I don't think these things are good, but what it means is that there's a lot of work to be done right now. That you might say a lot of souls are coming into the planet right now who are distressed, and so there's an enormous need for healing just to alleviate the pain and the stress that people are under. That's probably really important work. And, before a paradigm shift can really take place, there needs to be just right now. So I do focus on healing a lot personally. If I'm awake in the middle of the night, I have nothing else to do, and if I'm alert enough to remember, I will try and focus on sending healing vibrations, healing energy out into the world, sometimes to specific individuals and sometimes just to the world in general, or to particular parts of the world in general, like my neighborhood or my city, or uh, like most big cities, Albuquerque has plenty of troubles. So there's just an enormous need for that alone. The change in paradigm is almost by definition something that takes place outside of conscious awareness. You can't not tell people, here's the new paradigm, everybody. I don't think it works that way at all. I think people, a paradigm is something that people hold, they don't even realize that they hold the paradigm. Many people who are materialists, if you ask them, they wouldn't even know that they're materialists. And they may not even think of themselves as that. They might think that they're good Catholics or something along those lines. But the idea of a paradigm shift is very dramatic when it does happen. For example, in the Middle Ages, over 100,000, I understand, mostly women, were put to death because they were accused of witchcraft. And that went on up until the 17th century here in the United States, in Massachusetts. 20 people were stoned to death in Salem, Massachusetts, being accused of witchcraft, because the paradigm implicitly in those years was that witchcraft is real and it's dangerous, and the appropriate response is you kill them, or do something equally drastic, and certainly you confiscate their property, which was a big motive, I think, behind a lot of that. Today, the paradigm seems to be, oh, there's no such thing as witchcraft. So that's a major paradigm shift. And nobody told anybody, we're going to change paradigms now. We're going to have a new paradigm. It just happened organically. And so we're still in the paradigm of witchcraft is not real. Now, I've talked to Tom about witchcraft, and I know he understands there is a reality to it, and it's not always savory. I know lots of people who think of themselves as witches, and they're generally involved in kind of nature religion, and I see it as largely beneficial. I don't see it as a negative or hostile thing. But who was it recently, not long ago? A woman ran for senator in the state of Delaware, and there was an old video of her that came out when she said, "Oh, I'm practicing witchcraft." And when that became public, it's like nobody would vote for her. She lost an election that she might have otherwise won because she was accused. And she had to make her own video, which says, "I'm not a witch." she had to demonstrate. I don't know, I forget her name, but uh, the truth of the matter is, as best I can tell, that psychic functioning, just like other human talents, can be put to negative purposes. That you can use psychic functioning. There are reports that have been around for a long time. I don't know if there's any truth to them. I'm doubtful, but they were around, I think, as a way of motivating either the Americans or the Russians to engage in psychical research by saying, look what the other side is doing. They have figured out how to stop the heart of a frog or something along those lines. It's been reported that that took place in Russia. Uh, the Russians reported on similar kinds of experiments that were taking place supposedly in the United States, and saying, if they're doing that, we've got to keep up. We can't let them get ahead in the psychic wars. So, but there's good evidence from the literature and anthropology that uh, people can throw curses, throw hexes. Uh, there's even a ritual known as the pointing of the bones, which is a death hex, which one anthropologist wrote about, because in anthropology, the conventional theory about death hexes was, well, the person knows they've been hexed. It triggers their stress response to such a degree that the immune system weakens and they die. And but this anthropologist named Ronald Rose, incidentally, published an account of a person who had moved from Cuba, where the death hexes were practiced, to Florida. And so his former neighbors in Cuba were angry at him and cursed him with the pointing of the bones ritual. And he was in Florida. He didn't know anything about it when he died mysteriously. So there's at least some suggestion, and there are many other examples in the literature, that there is a dark side to psychic functioning. It's not all joy and positive things. Although I would go so far, and I'm pretty sure Tom Campbell would agree with me, that even the dark side has its benefits. If you were to ask me my philosophy of life, to which I aspire, it would be to love everyone and everything all the time, which means unconditional, no holds barred, all across the board, including things that might be considered the most evil, horrible, disgusting things you can imagine, as well as my instinctive distaste and disgust for those things. I would love all of that. And I aspire to do that because, from my point of view, it's all one. It's all part of me and it's all part of you. It's part of who we all are. And I tend to assume that ultimately the universe is here at all, because there needn't be a universe. There could be just nothing. The fact that something exists instead of nothing, as far as I'm concerned, is ultimately for the benefit of the one consciousness coming to know itself, coming to, and us, as Tom would say, individuated units of consciousness, coming to appreciate more the ways and power of love.
Beautifully said, Jeffrey. I agree with all of it. And what stuck with me is the how you put it into practice with your healings late at night, sending out love to everybody. I am convinced it's crucial to focus on healing, self-healing, heal our own trauma, our own fear, our own insecurities, and also spread it to others. So we also host a global healing almost every Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
where we do get together as a group and we send out love to the whole world, and we have like a list of people of requests where people, and also on the Consciousness Hub platform we always accept healing requests, and
Mhm.
we do actively work on those healing requests. So
Oh,
that's something
very
to
good.
take advantage of.
Yeah. I tend to think that anybody who evolves in a mystical or psychic way is going to discover their own natural capacity for self-healing and for sharing that impulse with others.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have an amazing mind. It's been really such an amazing pleasure to also hear your perspective on the paradigm shift, and how you're contributing, just doing it one step at a time with your interviews and the work that you do. Um, I think I'd like to open the question and answer now. Brad has a question. You can
Hello,
also,
Jeffrey. Sorry, go
Hello.
ahead, Caroline.
I just wanted to say that people, if they don't want to be on camera and ask, they can also put their questions in the chat. I'll read them out loud.
Well, lovely, lovely listening to you there for that hour, Jeffrey. That was beautiful. I didn't know you coming into this, other than you became friends with Tom, and you're the guy that did the 10-hour interview. So that's impressive. Was that all in one take?
No, it's how many takes has it been? I think maybe seven. And I think we're up to about 15 hours.
Wow. Oh my God. And so he's living near you and he just comes over and you're just like, let's do this.
Yeah.
I love
He's
that.
spending time in Albuquerque. Originally, I had suggested to Marla Fries, many of you probably know Marla, who has been a follower of Tom for a long time and a friend of mine, that maybe she could interview him for our channel. But she said, well, wait, Tom is going to be spending time in Albuquerque where you are. Why don't you do it? So
Hmm.
I
Well, that's
got,
awesome.
yeah.
I know a few people have really enjoyed that interview, so thank you. So with this chat, there's a few things that have really caught my attention. You're a comedic teacher, and then also the paradigm shift. I was wondering, there's kind of two questions I have. Do you see comedy as some sort of an enlightened gift that humans have? Is it naturally telepathic? And then from there, I guess we could touch on the paradigm and how you see maybe comedy could play a role in unlocking the healing that has to occur.
Well, I think laughter is very healthy for people. You
Hmm.
smile, you have a bubbly feeling. As long as you're not laughing at somebody else's misfortune, I think it's pretty healthy. And also, it puts you into an altered state of consciousness. It certainly did for me when I had that epiphany listening to Gene Houston. So, in the speaking field, my wife is a professional speaker and very active in that world. In fact, past president of what was called the International Speakers Federation or the Global Speakers Federation. So she traveled all over the world uh, as a public speaker and worked with the national speaking organizations in many different countries. And they have a saying amongst professional speakers, which is, do I have to use humor in my speech? And the answer is, well, only if you want to get paid.
That's the best speech. You have to have one or two lines in there, or you can't even, broadcast to the audience. I don't know. As someone who can make people laugh, the first time I asked Tom a question, it was at the Doorway to the Future. I opened with a joke. And I had Tom laughing, and I remember we recorded that, and I would listen to his laugh, and I was like, "Yes, I got him." It's a good way to share a message. So, yeah, that's interesting. I'm a improv artist and I work with the hub and in a very important lesson with consciousness development and lowering entropy is this lesson I learned from improv, which is yes and. Have you ever practiced comedy or ever performed comedy or used it in your spirituality?
No, and I'm pretty much the opposite kind of a person. I'm quite content not including humor in our interviews. I try to be just matter of fact, and people notice that I laugh a lot. And, if I notice that something is funny, I can have a big, hearty laugh about it. But I don't make any effort personally to include humor in the work that I do, which is probably why I'm not a highly paid professional speaker.
Well, I wonder why you've had this name, Jerry Seinfeld Mishlove. They keep calling you. Just see, I got one there, and I like your laugh. You're good. You're good. All right, Olga.
Thank you. You mentioned that you've interviewed and talked to a lot of people who have different theories of how this whole thing works. Is there any theory that resonated with you the most?
Well, I think they all have their strengths, and I probably spent the most time with the work of Arthur M. Young, uh, who founded an organization called the Institute for the Study of Consciousness. And when I was still a graduate student in criminology at Berkeley, there were a group of graduate students interested in consciousness. And they would meet, and one of them was a friend of Arthur Young and brought him to give a lecture to this group at Berkeley. And I asked a lot of questions, and then we learned, oh, he's opening up an institute in Berkeley, and he bought a big house, and he plans to hold sessions of the institute there. And then Arthur Young invited me to live there and be in that house with him. So I spent quite a lot of time, 6 months or so, living there in a close friendship with him until he died, which was 25 years later. So I got to know him very well. And he had a very detailed theory in which he looked at the periodic table of the elements, which you probably all have seen if you studied chemistry. And he said, we can expand this to make it a periodic table of everything. And he actually did that. And I think did it very successfully and pointed out a lot of, you could call them numerological things about the numbers 4 and 7 that appear in the periodic table, and the different properties of, for example, different groups of elements, how you can expand that into the biological world and the human world. So on top of that, he was an astrologer, a master astrologer who had an uncanny ability to notice things. For example, when I first got my doctoral degree and my committee had approved my dissertation for my parapsychology degree, I went right away to see Arthur Young, and you should tell him I was so proud. And he said to me, took out his ephemeris. He said, well, said, how long have you been in this program? I said, I think it's been about 6 years since I entered the parapsychology program to getting my degree. And he looked through his charts and he said, well, it's going to take you another 6 years to undo all the damage that the university has done to you. At the time, of course, that seemed like, what is he talking about? But looking back, I can say he was right about that. On another occasion, he took out the ephemeris. He began asking me about the major dreams and synchronicities that I'd had in my life, because his life was also colored by dreams and synchronicities. And he was interested because he found in his own chart a very obscure notation in astrology called the Arabian part of coincidence, which has to do with the angular relationship of the planets Mars and Uranus. And in his chart, they were in opposition to each other. And in my chart, they're also in opposition to each other. And he found that when transiting planets were conjuncting that opposition in the natal chart, that's when these major synchronicities occurred in his life. And he went through the same thing in my life and found that, yes, the same thing was happening for me as well, which seemed really astonishing, uncanny. How could that be? But there it was.
Wow. Wow, amazing.
So it's an example of something that totally mystifies me. I have no rational explanation whatsoever for why anything about astrology should be true at all, but it seems to be uh, in a very precise and uncanny ways.
Has he published his work somewhere, this table?
He has a book out about his his general overview of astrology called The Geometry of Meaning, in which he looks at the measure formulas in physics and the sine waves and correlates all of this to the 12 signs in astrology. But and in fact, with regard very specifically to these coincidences and the Arabian part of coincidence, he actually published that in what was called the Institute Notes for the Institute for the Study of Consciousness. And all of these notes are archived, and I've talked to the archivist, but they can't find that one. So it's kind of disappeared for now. I keep looking. I keep expecting because I've seen it and I know it exists. It's just a question of when is it going to turn up?
They will resurface to the right point, probably.
Yeah,
When we're ready to see them.
right.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, Olga stayed. It's 2 a.m. for Olga. She stayed up to talk to you. So
Well, thank you, Olga. Where are you?
I'm in Germany,
I see. Okay.
the other side completely.
Mhm.
Mac Moore, do you have a question?
Thank you. Hi, everyone from Vancouver, Canada. Hi, Jeffrey.
Hello.
I was so interested in your talk, and my question is, I think we all agree that we are all one consciousness, and we are here to experience this world and grow and become love eventually. My question is, if that's the case, why do we have various levels of consciousness? Like everybody seems to travel to live in their own bubble, and we have different levels of awareness of consciousness. If that's the case, that we are all one, why we have separate levels of consciousness?
It's a beautiful question. And I have puzzled over it for a long time. I don't think I have a good answer yet, but I can tell you this. On one occasion, I asked Arthur Young, who was my mentor, about this. And he said, well, we're very far removed from that level of awareness that we're all one. He said, in fact, between our normal daily life in a three-dimensional physical world with one dimension of time and the reality of oneness, we're separated by another world completely, and it's the world that connects us to the oneness. And he called that the realm of mythos, the realm of mythology, the realm, for example, why astrology is so important in his thinking is because it is the bridge between our sense of being isolated and separate and connected to this world of oneness. And I think if you talk deeply to people, you'll see that Stanley Krippner has, in fact, written books about this. He calls it personal mythology. Everybody has their own myth about who they are in life. Some people will tell you, I'm a connector. I'm like the ferryman who carries people across the river from one realm to another, or people embody different archetypes or deities. In the Jungian psychology, they talk about their gods in every man and goddesses in every woman. And of course, it depends on which goddess or god is active within you. And each of these beings has their own mythology, or it might be an angel or what is called a daimon. I recently did a lengthy interview with a person I've interviewed now 15 times, Bernardo Kastrup. I think some of you have probably seen the interviews with Tom and Bernardo together. And Bernardo, if you ask him his mythology, he would say, I've got a daimon. It's a spiritual being, and it's an instigator, and it keeps pushing me to write all these books and to do the work I'm doing, and it won't let me alone, and it doesn't care whether I have my ego is satisfied or not with all of this work, or whether I make an income, or whether my wife is happy, or whether I can buy the big house I want to live in. It cares for none of these things. It just wants me to do this work, and it sort of won't leave me alone until I do it. I can't hardly have any rest. So that's his personal mythology. Socrates had a daimon in his mythology too, but it was a different kind. It was one that warned him of danger, of things not to do. It told him, didn't care what he did. It just told him, don't do this or don't do that. And he believed it was always helpful to him.
Some sort of a guardian angel.
Yes, that's right. Your myth could be that you have a guardian angel or a spirit guide, or you've been touched by the Lord Jesus, or everybody has their own myth. And, in a materialistic culture, we often think of these things as silly, anachronistic, irrational, the rising tide of superstition, and so on. But ultimately, these myths are what we in the human world use to connect ourselves to the absolute.
Yeah, I think, and I conclude that hence, this world, this reality is um, there's no reality actually because everybody lives their own reality. There's nothing's real because everybody interprets their own reality, and ultimately this world is not real. I think that's the interpretation of we're living in a, how to put it, in an imaginary world. We just imagine
Yeah.
our reality.
Or as Tom might say, it's a simulation. It's as if we're in a computer game. I
That's the word.
disagree with that. I don't think this world is an imaginary world, actually, uh, any more imaginary than the world of everything is one, everything is connected. Uh, I think they're both real. I think this world is absolutely real, as a matter of fact, that how can I put it? There is no privileged perspective. All perspectives are equally real, and none of them are imaginary.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I like the drawing behind the samurai. This very mysterious samurai.
Or a monk.
Beautiful.
A monk, I
Oh,
think.
monk, yeah.
Let's hear it, Kim.
Hello, everybody. So Jeffrey, I'm curious, and you just kind of touched on the point here. After all your interviews with Tom, I'm curious, and obviously, since it's 8:26 here on the East Coast, not in any great detail, but I'm very curious. What about Tom's theory do you not agree with? Just curious.
Well, I don't know that there's anything in particular that I disagree with. Actually, I think the theory is incomplete. There are many details that could be fleshed out, and it's as Tom points out, it's based on metaphor. So any theory that is based on metaphors or analogies, you can only go so far with a metaphor. It's not like a mechanism. In fact, it sounds almost mechanistic when he talks about this simulation that we're in being rendered as if it were by a computer. It sounds like there could be a mechanism, but it's not mechanistic actually. And uh, so I think it's a very handy metaphor. I think it helps a lot of people, but I
Yeah.
don't see it as being an ultimate explanation. Um, and in truth, I don't think that reality is explainable in an ultimate sense. I think that uh, reality is so mysterious and paradoxical that all words fall short. We're not going to be able to put it into human language. But I do think that Tom has done as good a job as anybody that I'm aware of in terms of coming up with a way to get a handle on it. Arthur Young, who, as I mentioned, was a mentor I spent much more time with than with Tom, had a theory of everything with far more detail about the way plants and animals function and the role of different levels and how human development compares to the developments in the plant and animal kingdoms. So, there's a lot of things when you have a theory of everything that you might want to address uh, that that Tom hasn't even begun to uh, explore.
Okay, that makes sense. I in my own life, my own experience or whatever, there have been like some really bizarre things um that I've experienced that Tom's theory has explained um that other theories have not explained. So that's why I embrace Tom's theory.
Mhm.
But I also understand, and he said it himself, that this is his theory and that we need to explore our own. So that's why I ask you, what about Tom's theory? Um, do you not embrace, shall we say? So thank you. I appreciate that.
I would say this, that it's a little presumptuous to call it a theory of everything. It is an overarching theory. It does deal with a lot of large questions,
Yep.
but I don't think it deals with everything. A theory of everything to physicists is one that talks about the four forces of physics and how they can be unified. And I don't know that, I think Tom's theory hints in that direction, but it's not a complete mathematical theory of the unification of all four forces. It's far from that. Uh, so it's probably a bit of an exaggeration to call it a theory of everything, but it certainly does deal with some very significant large issues.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. And if you wouldn't mind answering, what are those four things that you believe that his theory does not address?
Well, the four forces in physics are the weak and strong nuclear forces electromagnetism and gravity. So currently in physics, we have quantum theory, which deals with the three forces, the weak and strong nuclear forces and electromagnetism. And then we have relativity, which deals with gravity. And all those theories work extremely well, but they're not compatible with each other. So the big mystery in physics is how do we unify gravity with the other three forces? And so, people are exploring string theory and something called quantum loop gravity. To try and come up with a quantum gravity particle or something. I think none of those approaches are generally accepted yet. I think most physicists would agree, there are probably 30 or 40 unsolved problems, major unsolved problems today in physics. So a theory of everything would try and address each of them individually.
Okay.
That's just physics. We're not talking biology or botany or anthropology or spirituality.
Okay. All right. Thank
Little
you.
spirituality. There's some spirituality there. I'm curious to know. I have my hand up next, so I'm just going to jump in here as a co-host as well. Jeffrey, I just wanted to say you're a man of wisdom. I like how you are very skeptical. That is one thing Tom does preach. So well done to your skepticism of everything. That is perfect. I'm curious to know. Um, well, actually, first, I'd like to just say something. I do agree with you that Tom or any other theory is going to be incomplete because the understanding of reality is actually non-physical, and words are something of this physical universe we use. So you truly can't comprehend the vastness of the unknown with something generated here in this physical reality. So I do agree with you on that. Intuitively, I think the only way you can know truth, right, is through the intuitive way. You have to feel it. Words can be a good way. And what I see Tom as is this new programmer for a mental software that could go spread across the world and help us access higher levels of physics that maybe helps the physicists approach these situations and fill everything in from there. But he's more of a layer one, and then the layer two and layer three, the application layer, that will get worked out over time. Maybe Tom will see it in this avatar, maybe not. He'll come back, and I know he'll be studious and working hard on the next one. Jeffrey, you are from San Francisco. I am very obsessed with what could be called techno shamanism, techno mysticism. I love the idea of science and spirituality merging. I was curious to know, since you are San Fran a local, and that's where Silicon Valley is, and if there is clearly a very powerful spiritual energy there. I just finished interviewing or talking with Rizwan Burke, and he has a book mentioning Silicon Valley, the Zen Entrepreneur, Zen Entrepreneurship, great book. Do you see science and spirituality merging? Do you see signs of it? Do you have any input on this? Can you expand?
Well, parapsychology to me is where that is really happening more
Mm-hmm.
than anywhere else that I'm aware of. Parapsychology is a field that touches on all the spiritual traditions and all of the sciences, actually. So, very much involved in the unification of science and spirituality, or science and spirit. But I should correct you. I'm not originally from the San Francisco Bay Area. I lived there for 30 years, so it's an important part of my soul. I suppose I consider myself in many ways a Northern Californian, but I was born in Wisconsin and lived in Wisconsin for the first 18 years of my life, actually first 21 years of
Mm-hmm.
my life. So even, before I ever got to San Francisco, I was just a conventional kid out of the Midwest.
Yeah. Is that the Bible Belt area? Did you grow up in that?
No, no,
No.
the Bible Belt is in the South.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay. Wisconsin's a
Wisconsin,
little more north. Yeah.
it's definitely in the north central part of the
Hmm.
United States.
My apologies as a Canadian. No, I love that. Do you see people like in 5, 10, 20 years having some sort of a technological device that is a digital spiritual tool they use?
Well, there are some devices like that right now. There's the quantum random number generators that are used in a project called the Global Consciousness Project. It was started, oh gosh, back in the 1980s by a fellow named Roger Nelson. He had these distributed all over the world. They're using quantum mechanical principles to generate a constant stream of random output, and nothing is known in science more random than quantum mechanical decays or fluctuations in a vacuum or quantum tunneling of electrons. All of those things are completely unpredictable. And so if you want a pure random signal for cryptography or for parapsychology research or for gaming, for a slot machine or something like that, they use these now very widely. But what Roger Nelson attempted to do was to see if the you could think of it as the quantum foam. The quantum waves are probabilistic waves outside of time and space that underlie the entire physical universe and seem to be responsive at times to human intention, like people can influence them through psychokinesis or predict them through precognition. So what Roger began to do is he had, at one point over 100 of these devices spread all over the world, and their signals were being fed into a single computer, keeping track of it all 24 hours a day. And then he would look at major events that captured the attention of the world, like the attacks in 9/11 or the funeral of Princess Diana or a Super Bowl event or the opening ceremony of the Olympics, where 1 billion people are all watching on television together. And they found that with 500 events of this sort, there were deviations from the normal random output of these devices, as if uh, the quantum foam underlying reality is sensitive to the group consciousness of the humans on the planet. And
The Maharishi effect.
well, similar.
Similar? Yes. 100%.
And
Yeah.
that work is now being taken over by another organization. They're doing what they call Global Consciousness Project 2.0. It's called the Heart Math Institute, and they've upgraded the equipment, and they're doing more sophisticated studies on it now. And uh, people, uh, there are lots of people who have these devices and who are working with quantum randomness just as a way to train their mind. So that's just one little example. There's a whole organization. I believe it was founded, in fact, by Jeffrey Martin, who is now the president of the California Institute for Human Science, with which I'm affiliated. And
Mm.
so this is an organization that keeps up with, they have a conference every year about consciousness technologies. And so all the people who have brainwave equipment or flashing lights and sounds to alter your consciousness or ultrasound, all the devices that are out there that people use for enhancing their consciousness, it's an industry. There are many, many manufacturers of these devices. Some of them are very sophisticated and expensive, like flotation tanks and things of that sort. So this is an ongoing industry. It's growing every year. There are lots of people who feel, I can't do it on my own through meditation. I want to use some sort of technological aid, and there are many, many of them out there.
I completely agree, and I'm an entrepreneur in that space, so I'm happy to have asked you that and get your answer. And you were at the Psi Games, and there were a few gentlemen walking around with those helmets on. I wonder if they were controlling any craft. So I'll let Caroline, I'll let Caroline get in here, but I would love to talk about UFOs if we get a chance.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be just curious also where your personal journey is going. Like, what do you have for yourself in mind in the coming years? What are your goals moving forward?
I'm really very happy just to keep doing what I'm doing right now, talking to you or people such as yourself. We put out a new video every single day on the New Thinking Aloud channel. Well, they're not all new. Some of them are recycled interviews from the past, typically 3 new ones a week at least. And setting up a graduate program where people can earn accredited degrees in parapsychology. Like that's plenty for me. But we also have been publishing a magazine. We have a weekly newsletter. Um, and so we're active, we're reaching out, we're just trying to stimulate the conversation and around the world. And in our little way, we have 200,000 subscribers on the New Thinking Aloud channel. I think we're having an impact.
Absolutely, no doubt. And we have a few fans here. Also, Olga was taking a deep interest into a guest you had on the show for a couple of times. Olga, would you like to
Yeah.
ask?
Yeah, that's true. I've came across your interviews with Annika and Tristan,
Oh, yeah.
and I found deeply fascinating how what they told about meditation and the different dimensions, and also speaking in the language of Tom Campbell, I assume they had to learn to switch different data streams very, very fast within a very short period of time because, like, if I remember that correctly, it just was 3 years when they learned to coexist with each other.
Mhm.
Because before that, they were kind of like unaware, more or less, of each other. So I was wondering if, yeah, if they would be willing, maybe even to host a talk and ask some of those questions about, again, meditation, maybe share some tips, insights, because this is kind of like really awesome and yeah, amazing.
I agree with you. I think they've been forced because of the strange situation in which they found themselves sharing a brain, sharing a body together, learning how to be in the single body without interfering with each other. It forced them to uh, become skilled at meditation and achieving higher states of consciousness.
Yeah.
So I think they could be very good teachers for other people. Right now, they are being researched,
Okay.
people, which I think is very important. I think that they have a contribution to make to science. So I'm just not sure about their availability, to do the sort of thing that you've suggested, but
Yeah.
I think it would be a good thing, and I imagine eventually they will do things of that sort.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you have fascinating guests on your podcast. I've been it's like it's also so many to choose from. It's hard to know where to start. Can you recommend us any other fascinating guests we should look into that you felt deeply
Well,
inspired
I
by?
can tell you this, the hottest topic right now is the UFO topic because of government hearings that are taking place and slow leaks from whistleblowers suggesting that the government knows a lot more than it's revealing, that they've actually have captured some crafts, have biologicals in freezers somewhere. So people are really curious now what's going on. For years and years, for decades, the government has sort of poo-pooed it, and still is in some branches of the government, saying, oh, there's nothing here to see. On the other hand, it's as if perhaps we want other countries to think that we know a lot more, that we have these devices and we know how to fly them and we can make weapons out of them. So there's a lot of mystery around what's really going on. How much can you trust of what you hear? Is anything real at all? Is it possible that the government is using what they call psionic assets, people with telepathic ability to lure these UFOs into landing where they can be captured? There is this suggestion out there right now that this is exactly what's going on. And it's hard to make sense of it. Uh, I would say that some of the people who are at the forefront of the disclosure movement, people like Daniel Sheehan, the attorney who is representing the New Paradigm Institute, which is lobbying the government to release all of their files on UFOs, uh, are at the forefront of this movement. On the other hand, I'm convinced there will never be a full disclosure, because what is the president of the United States supposed to say? Yeah, they're here, but we can't do anything about it. And they're abducting people, but we can't stop them. And they have, and we don't know what their agenda really is. The government isn't going to do that. It would just um, create.
That's a threat to national security.
Yeah, it would be considered that. It would just, make people uncomfortable, and they don't want to do that. And they don't want to admit how much they don't know. And they would just soon use it as a form of disinformation to keep our supposed adversaries off guard.
100%. As someone who's witnessed craft, and I got into meditation, one, to heal myself, two, because I discovered that's how you fly UFOs through like documentaries when I was waking up. The technology aspect behind it, that's the reason why I'm working on the concepts of brain-computer interfaces, because I believe that's how you actually get to functioningly control craft. So you said Jacques Vallée and Uri Geller, these are legends in the field of parapsychology. Like, when I got a plane ride to the Psi Games from Atlanta to Charlottesville, and somehow divinely, Tom was right in front of me with his girlfriend Eileen, or partner Eileen, and then right in front of them was Danny Sheehan and his wife. And so I saw him reading Uri Geller's book, and we were all making jokes because we were experiencing some issues, and he had the book up, and I was like, "This guy's a legend." So you're mentioning these legends. Do you have experience yourself with this paranormal phenomena that Tom's theory can't explain?
Well, during the time I worked with Ted Owens, the PK man, he had some very remarkable abilities. On one occasion, he told me that he was going to create a UFO, because he had a reputation for, back in the 1960s even, for being able to call down UFOs. And he said, I'll make 3 of them appear for you near the San Francisco Bay Area. And at one point, there was a very good sighting, an abduction that took place, and it was well reported in the media. A fellow at 4 in the morning in Concord, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, got abducted right in downtown Concord. And a person with no background, he did file a police report. We interviewed him. He was completely sincere, not seeking any publicity of any kind. And then Owens was on the phone with me, and he said, I can feel it coming. He said, this is going to be the biggest UFO sighting ever. It's going to be seen by hundreds of people. It will be photographed, and the photograph will be published on the front page of one of your local newspapers. And that actually happened 4 days later. The photograph was on the front page of the Berkeley Gazette. The UFO was seen over the campus of Sonoma State College, as it was then called. The art department had an event going on. They had an artist who flew an airplane with smoke trailing out the back, making designs in the sky. It was his art form. When the UFO appeared right in his airspace, 3,000 feet above the campus, it was seen by the pilot who we interviewed and by hundreds of students who were photographing and even videotaping it. And the videotape of it was shown on the Channel 9 Evening News in San Francisco. So, that was a remarkable hit.
Mm-hmm.
On another occasion, Ted Owens called me up on Christmas Eve, 1985. And he said in his big booming voice, "Jeffrey, this is the most important phone call you will ever receive. It's up to you. You have to convince the U.S. government not to send up the next space shuttle, because if they do, my UFOs are going to shoot it down."
Mm-hmm.
And that was 3 weeks before the Challenger exploded.
Challenger. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, that got me thinking.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's something to open you up to a new paradigm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there have been some events like that.
Mm-hmm. How about mystical stuff? You've never had any synchronicities that are too divine, too strange. There's high strangeness. Maybe you have chills. You've never had mystical experiences like that?
Well, no, I would regard my dream of Uncle Harry that I talked about at the beginning of the program to be of that nature. Today, probably the best word for it would be a shared death experience, which is, it's like he took me along part way on his journey into the afterlife. And I do think the near-death experience, the shared death experience are forms of mystical experiences. So, yeah, that happened to me. I haven't forgotten about it, but it was over 50 years ago.
Okay, well, I think we're coming closely to an end. It's been a lovely 2 hours with you. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for taking the time for us. It's been very enlightening, and I hope we can speak again sometime. I really enjoyed all the insights you had to share with us.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.